and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, I've got the greatest pleasure to introduce to you Linda Clay. Linda is a business and a lifestyle strategist. Linda, welcome, welcome.
Hi, Nina. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you for joining. I want to dive in right into how you actually started on this journey, because I know you have got an incredible story and I think it'll be super valuable for people to hear. So would you be up for sharing it?
I will. I am totally up to sharing it. I think it's important in the sense of my journey to bring me to this point started when I was 17 and I became an unwed mother in the 60s, which was an absolute no-no. I mean, you just did not get pregnant. Good girls didn't. It was a shameful thing. And I ended up going to an unwed mother's home and giving my child up for adoption. What I didn't realize until just recently was the catalyst that has driven me my entire life. Going through, you know, when I look back and I go, wow, no wonder I was so driven to always be better, to always be on top, because I was trying to prove to myself that I wasn't a bad person. You know, I realized just a couple years ago the shame that was associated that I'd been carrying. And I bring that up because so many people don't understand that things that have happened to us in our past, we carry with us in our, what they call muscle memory. So until you can really face those past things, they still resonate within you and they can come out at any time in your life. So after going through that, I did get married several years later, had two beautiful children. And then when my oldest was 14, she got addicted to drugs. And that added a new element to my life of being a mom, not being able to put a Band-Aid on a problem anymore. It wasn't like she had skidded outside, scratched her knee, or, you know, banged up her knee and she could come in and I could go, here, you know, let's put a Band-Aid on and kiss the boo-boo away, because this was her journey. And so I had to go through, in a sense, a grieving process of looking at a child that when I brought into this world, I thought, wow, what a beautiful world she has. And to realize that her world was not my world and was totally different. That's been a battle for her for over 30 years. And there were points in that 30 years that I had to step away and go, I love you, but I can't be involved in your life because it was affecting me. So it was a huge, long journey, long lesson in life. And then, you know, things roll as life does. Excuse me. And I got a job and I worked in corporate America. And I'd been putting, 9 years into this company, really working hard. They come to me and they say, if you want to be a store manager, you have to move to X city. And I was going, but I don't want to move there. And they go, if you want to be a store manager, then you'll move there. Otherwise, you'll never be a store manager. So I did it. And it was probably one of the toughest jobs I've ever had. It led me through a whole process of realizing that I couldn't meet their expectations. And what I didn't know was they were using me as an example. So they would give me these really high expectations. I couldn't meet them. And so, you know, I was going through a process of going, wow, I'm going to end up getting fired. And I sure as hell wasn't going to get fired. So I, you know, agreed that I would leave the company. I left the company. And what I didn't know, again, you go through a grieving process with that, because if you put your life and soul into a company and you're letting go of all of that, it's a grief process. But what I didn't know was the door was opening up. And I walked through that door and ended up having the best job in the world working for a bookstore, running a huge multi-million-dollar store, brand new from day one. I opened it up. It was like Christmas every single day, Nina. I mean, I just have a passion for books. And I'd walk in and I'd have to check out what new books came in, were my authors coming in. And I mean, it was just absolutely phenomenal. And then my husband started getting sick. And it was like, you know, okay, so we take him to the doctor. They say, oh, he's got diabetes. We put him on diabetes medicine. You know, he seems to be getting better. Fast forward a few months, and he's complaining about his side hurting. So we take him back to the doctor. And they kept telling us it was his diabetes, just keep taking the medicine. They tried to adjust medicine, all that. But he wasn't getting better. That started what I call my WTF year, which was probably the second most crucial kind of pivoting point in my life. So I went on a business trip, and I got back and my daughter picked me up and not my husband. And by this time, Nina, we had bought a house. We had this 5-year plan, what we were going to do. I was actually we were helping to raise my granddaughter. So we had this whole thing mapped out. And so for anyone in the audience, if you've ever sat down and you've got this plan and you just know this is what you're going to do with your life, well, that was what, was this big, beautiful picture in front of us. And the day we moved into the house, though, he couldn't help. He was in so much pain. He actually laid in the back of the car or the truck and kind of like slept the entire move. And all these young kids helped us get into the house. Okay, so a couple weeks later, I go on that business trip. My daughter picks me up. She goes, Mom, I had to take Dad to the urgent care because he was in so much pain. And I go, oh my God, what's going on? And well, Mom, they don't know what's going on, but he says he's better. So I talked to him. He said, no, I'm okay. Fast forward another week, I'm taking him to the urgent care. Then I'm taking him to the emergency room because the pain in his side was so excruciating that, we didn't know how to stop it. And the emergency room finally just said, we don't know what's wrong with him. You need to go to a doctor. Here's a recommendation. Go to this doctor. So we did. 4 weeks later, 4.5 weeks later, whatever, the time frame is kind of fuzzy still to this day. The doctor told us I'm doing one more blood test because everything he had done, he couldn't find out what was wrong. He said, but it's going to take a while. The blood test has to be sent to California. Okay, fine, And then finally we're called into his office and the doctor goes, I have to refer you to an oncologist. So I knew right there that he had cancer. And then he goes, what hospital do you want to go to? And I said, what do you mean, what hospital? And I said, are you saying he's going to end up in the hospital? And he goes, oh yeah, he'll definitely end up in the hospital. And it's like in that 1 3-minute time frame, my entire world was what I knew physically was gone. And all of a sudden it's almost like an out-of-body experience that you're physically there, but your mental state is on another plane. And so that we went through the next 4 months of hospitalization, of radiation treatment, chemotherapy, all these things, and nothing was helping. They discovered that what he had was called multimyelinoma, which is a blood cell cancer. It's inside the bone. It's one of the most painful cancers a person can have. And by the time that it was recognized, it was halfway up his spine. And that was what was causing the pain, was that. So finally, he ends up in the hospital for a week because he had gotten so bad. His feet were swollen. Anyway, so they kept checking him out. They couldn't figure out why he wasn't getting better. And he kept complaining of his stomach. So finally, we convinced somebody that they need to do something and find out what's wrong with his stomach. Meanwhile, that week, I was playing nurse. So I was measuring the urine. I was doing all these things because the hospital was so understaffed. So the CAT scan came back and he had a whole different kind of cancer. So he had 2 kinds of cancer. And so the doctor came in and he said, I can't do anything else. We can't give you the chemo for one, won't help the other, vice versa. And you can't have 2 kinds of chemo because it'll kill you. So I walked out with him and I said, so basically we're done. And he goes, yes. And I said, then I want to take him home. So I took him home. We couldn't get hospice care because he wasn't considered terminal. So I was shown how to change his IV, how to take care of his ulcerated sores, and I became his nurse for the last week of his life. And he lasted about 10 days. And so, again, you're in that mode of, I've got to keep going. I've got to keep moving. But it's all like, it's surreal. 2 weeks after my husband died, my oldest daughter, who had the drug issue, tried to commit suicide, and I found her. So, and then on top of that, I was only given 2 weeks off from work. I was able to get an extra week. And then I had to walk into retail at Christmas time. And now I realize all of that was a gift. At that time, I didn't see it as a gift. In fact, I can remember the few months after my husband died, sitting in my car at work, hitting the steering wheel, screaming, "Why me?" Now I know why not me. But it was such a year, and there were several other things that happened, that at the end of that year, I ended up being a single parent to my granddaughter and suffering from severe depression and PTSD, where I sat for several years, because who wants to come out of that dark cocoon and face life again and with all that pain and hurt? So I didn't. And this is where I think the universe kind of came in and decided to say, enough is enough. I was running out of my disability. In the States, you can apply for Social Security disability. They wouldn't give it to me. And all of a sudden it was like, I have no income. And that was that defining moment of the universe saying, Linda, enough. You've sat, you've, done what you need to do. Now it's time for you to come out again, basically. And so I've been on a journey since that time, that's 20 years ago, of rediscovering myself, of having to go through several different transformations since raising my granddaughter, coming to a point that I realized that I'd never been alone since I was 20, and literally wondered, who in the hell am I? Because all I've been is a mom or a manager or a coach or a friend or whatever, but never Linda. And so that prompted me to take a trip to Portugal for 5 months. And that's where I realized that I have this intuitive ability to help people and be able to read between the lines. So I started leaning towards a coaching or strategist career, which is what led me up to today.
Wow. What a story. Like, you have been through so much, and I totally understand now why you talk so much about the importance of being able to deal with grief and shame, because that's something that's not always talked about.
Right.
How did you, so in that moment when you felt like, you had your period when you were thinking, why me? And then, you had the first signs of the universe saying, Linda, enough. What were your first steps? How did you get over that?
Well, I just, that's a hard question sometimes for me to answer, but it's like a realization came to me that sitting in depression, and I'm not making light of depression because it's awful and it's hard, yet it does give you a sense of comfort because, you don't have to interact with people. People, when we're hurting inside, sometimes people add another element to it and we don't want to be hurt by people. But it was just an inner knowledge that I had to move forward. So I had to pick up the phone and call my family and say, I really kind of made some bad decisions. That was the first step. My brother was very supportive and I moved in with him. And because I tend to be a very independent person, which goes back to giving up a child for adoption. At that point, when I was that young, it was, I have to do these things myself. So it was very difficult for me to ask for help, but I actually had to ask for help. I got the help. I started sending out resumes, and within a month I had a job, and that job was in a different state. So I packed everything. My granddaughter, I call her a daughter now, but we moved to another state. And I worked there for like 8 months and realized it wasn't a good fit. So I reached out to my old company, got hired on in another state, clear across the country. And I went there. So every step, I just took one step at a time, which is what I recommend for anyone, is don't look at that whole picture. So if I had looked at, oh my God, I've got to build a whole huge life, then that I never would have been able to do it. But by looking at it going, I just have to tell my family what's going on, one step. And then once I did that, it was, now I've got to do this, another step. And so breaking it down into manageable pieces is so much easier for your mind to grasp, especially if you're having self-confidence issues, which you do when you're under, you go through depression, or traumatic things happen to you. It kind of like eats away at the strength that you thought you do have still, but it makes you feel like you don't, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. What I do love about the story as well is what you just said about, you moved you and your daughter to another state and started the job there and so on, and then realized that it wasn't a good fit. So then you reached out to your previous employer. What I love about this is still that awareness of, this isn't right for me, I'm going to do something about it, because I still don't think that there is enough of us in the world are doing it. There's so many people, it frustrates me, because I always think, if you're mourning, then don't mourn, be prepared to change something about it. If you're not prepared to change anything, then don't mourn, because that's not going to help. But I also can understand how sometimes, it's difficult for people to see if they had been in a certain situation of how you could change or what you could do is quite scary and so on. But your story, it's like, okay, I've been through so much, and you could have taken of like, oh, it's just another letdown and another knockback where this isn't the right fit. Like, how many more things that are not going to be the perfect, solution for me are going to happen? But instead you're like, this isn't the right fit, I'm going to do something about it, I'm going to continue to search for what's right.
I was listening to Rashina's. And she made a point at the end. She said, I wrote it down, if something needs to change, you might need to change your thinking. And I said, yes, that's exactly it. And so we get stuck in what we call paradigms, the same old thing all the time. So this works, this has always worked, so why should we change? Well, sometimes that paradigm doesn't work anymore. And so a perfect example is when I got to the East Coast for that job, and I spent a year there, and I made a difference in the store. I turned a store that was turned it 100% around. Loved the job, loved the people, but it wasn't working for me and my daughter. And it was like, okay, what do I do? And I decided I have to get out of retail because it's not working. When I have a 6-year-old and I'm working till midnight, it doesn't work. And so instead of going, to myself, oh, but you've always done this, this is what you need to do, I built a roadmap, treasure map of what I wanted. And what I wanted was to become a school administrator for a Waldorf school. So I took a huge piece of paper and I put evergreen trees on there because I wanted to come back to Seattle. And I put Seattle, Space Needle, and things that represent Seattle. And I put school administrator and a place for Kelsey. And I put all of this on this big, huge piece of paper. And I put it on the counter in the kitchen where I could see it in the morning when I had coffee, when I got home from work, and before I went to bed. Within a very short period of time, and I want to say maybe 3 months, I had saved enough money that I could live for a while back in Seattle. I found a moving van company that would come in, pack me up at a really, it was unbelievable price. And I contacted a school, Waldorf school, and they took Kelsey in on a scholarship. So I went, why not? So I gave notice. We drove cross country. We moved back. I start taking her to school. It was a 45-minute commute each way. So I said, I can't keep doing this 4 times a day. So I'll just volunteer. So I volunteer. Never done this kind of work before. It's a school, and they liked me and they asked if I wanted to work part-time. And I said, oh, sure. Why not? I'm here anyway. Might as well get, paid for it. And then within X amount of time, they asked if I wanted a full-time job. And then that job led to being a general manager, which was a school administrator.
Amazing.
And so you can change the paradigms. And I work with people on that. I help people change their paradigms. They're told that they have to be a certain way or they've got to live their life a certain way. You don't. My logo is a dragonfly. Dragonflies change direction without warning. You can change direction without warning. If something is not working, then change the direction and find something else. So I was at that school for 5 years. And then it didn't fit my lifestyle anymore. So I went to work at a church for a while as I was building a notary signing business or escrow signing business. And that was really going well. So I quit the administrator job and I started doing my business full time until the economy crashed. And then I had to find another job. And I'm approaching 60 years old by now. So I take another retail job, moved to a different state, hated the job, said, I can't do this anymore. Went and applied and got on as an escrow assistant. I had never done that work. I was 60 years old, 60, 61, had never done it. And I worked there for 2 years, 2.5 years, and then I got laid off. And then I started my first online business. So there's no reason why people have to get stuck in their paradigms. They don't have to do what people tell them to do. They do what they need to do for themselves.
I think that's not only a wonderful story, but a wonderful piece of advice, because I totally agree that people get stuck not just with what they think is expected of them, but sometimes they almost build that exterior of this is who I am. And
Right.
they cannot verge from that kind of persona that they have built.
Right.
So they rather have that mask on and continue in this way.
Yeah.
It probably doesn't make them happy anymore. They have they've outgrown that persona that they created. But perhaps the fear of judgment, of the fear of what will people say or think, is stopping them from actually truly kind of searching for what they want and trying to kind of create the life that they want, because they think that they have to be meeting the expectation that they've built around them.
Right. No, absolutely. I have one of my clients, I think she used to work, she's still working in a retail environment, but she started following me, and then she's in one of my group programs, and she wanted to be a counselor. And I said, well, why not? Why don't you do that? Well, because everybody says I can't. So who's everybody? Why not do it? So working with me, she's now on her 3rd level. So she completed the first 2 levels. She also had a deep desire to create a cake making business. So she's doing that on the side also. And she's doing something else that she won't tell me. She said it's a surprise. But she's taken all the things about learning how to schedule your day that makes sense for you. So many people schedule their day because everybody says, oh, this is how you should schedule your day. But their minds don't work that way. Well, don't listen to take what you can. But if it doesn't work for you, develop your own system. So she's developed her system. She does, I think, like theme days. I mean, all these things that we've talked about. And she was totally out of control in debt. We talked about that. She's now under control. She's making plans for the future that 1 year ago, she never would have thought would have happened. So it's, finding the right resources. It's understanding that you can change midstream. You can do it. Everybody can do it. That's part of the journey of life, I think.
I agree. And I think what I wanted to ask, because we're talking about not going with what everyone says or does or thinks, creating your own ways, and pick up the best bits of what works, but then develop your own stuff. What do you think, since you have entered the online kind of business world? I see a lot of people, I feel like this screaming from the top of a mountain, everyone's screaming different messages at the same time. New people are entering the market and basically are being swamped by download this 6-figure this, 6-figure that. I was born yesterday, I earned 1 million, and that sort of thing. What do you think of the whole, of the whole industry and what's going on, like, for women trying to enter this?
I'm, cards on the table, Nina. I've done it. I call myself an freebie junkie, because I've downloaded, I don't know how many freebies. They all sit in my computer hard, and I should delete them because they're taking up space. I've taken course after course. And what I found is when I start taking those courses, I go, well, I already know this. I already know this information. And that it's advertising. So when you look at advertising on television, I grew up in an era first where there wasn't a lot of advertising. You know, you went to a grocery store and you had maybe 3 choices for a product. Now you walk into a store and you've got, 50 feet of choices. So when you look at the online world, everybody is trying to advertise their product. Just because they say something is happening doesn't mean it's really happening. That's the number one caution. Because the difference between the old world and when I was in retail and the new world online is, in the old world, you're talking to people face to face. You can gauge their reactions. You actually had to physically go see something, right? Now it's all in writing by posts on Facebook. How you don't really know if that person is authentic. You don't really know if they're transparent. And so that's just a word of caution. I've been scammed a couple times myself. And so what I tell people is to really vet out who they're listening to. Understand that they could be saying, oh, you can make 6 figures in 6 months. They're not telling you how many years did it take them to get to that point. And because it works for them does not mean it's going to work for you. It's because, here's a story from my past. I sat down, was being interviewed to be what they call an operations manager in a store. And the person that was interviewing me was trying to catch me on, see if I would badmouth any of the store managers that I worked with. And so instead of, being caught, I just explained that what I do is when I work with store managers, I take all the good of each store manager that I can use within myself as a management person, and the things that I don't agree with or don't resonate with me, I push aside. And I'm saying that to everyone in regards to all the information on the internet. Take what works for you, the good points that fit your personality, fit who you are, how you show up, and the rest of it put aside. So, and to realize that just because it worked for that person, it does not mean it's going to work for you, because it's their gimmick. You have to develop your own gimmick, who you are, how you show up. You can't be that person.
I really love this. I totally agree with this. I think it can be very overwhelming. And I also know what it feels like to download all the different things. Because you think, do I need to be doing this? Do I need to be doing it? Is it Facebook? Shall I be on Pinterest, on Instagram? Like, what am I doing? Right. It's very easy to get lost and kind of not being able to achieve anything, because then all you're doing is chasing all the shiny objects.
That's it. And, I think part of it is people need to realize that maybe you can't totally give up the in-person. That maybe what you need to do is not only work through the internet and take the benefits that it does offer, which one of the biggest benefits is being able to connect to people in other countries. So like having a conversation with you 30 years ago would have been like, you're crazy. I couldn't have done this. But how neat that I could connect with you. I'm in Seattle and you're in London or in that area.
Yeah.
And so that right there is a benefit. But sometimes you need to actually create meetings or go to meetings and do in-person, face-to-face networking. And there's an energy in that is something. I just got back from a conference a few weeks ago, and oh my God, it was so amazing. The energy and being surrounded by other women that all have stories, and each one of their stories are different. And every single one of us walked away being touched by somebody else's story. And you don't get that necessarily through the internet.
Absolutely. I totally agree with this. I think like your story and what you have shared has been absolutely wonderful. And I think there's so much advice and so many tips within that for everyone. Because I think sometimes people think, especially with the online world, they look at all the success around, which, I think 90% of it is exaggerated anyway. But you can look at it and think, oh my God, nothing is, is going well for me. am I not good enough? Do I not have the skills? And so on. But actually, when they read the freebies or when they listen to the videos and whatever, they feel like you feel. Like, I already know that. I think a lot of it is not about any more or new information. It's about actual action and implementation and having clarity on like, what is your intuition telling you and who you are and what you're trying to achieve, rather than chasing all the new stuff that
Right. Well, and I think it becomes a mindset issue. So listening to you talk is like when you're going after those freebies and you think that's the answer, it's because your internal voice, that little voice in your head that says, oh, you can't do that, you're not qualified, or you don't have enough knowledge. So you think that, oh, that freebie is going to be the one, when the reality of it is that you have the knowledge. It's a matter of telling your little, I call them chitty chatty voices, that, you know, to be quiet, that, you know, you've got it. You understand what you have. You understand the knowledge, and you're able to take that knowledge and put it together. Now, maybe it's a matter of fine tuning your knowledge. So maybe it's a matter of brainstorming with somebody. What can I do with this? I know all this. How can I put it into a package, or how can I create a freebie with it? And I was in a conversation yesterday with somebody and sharing some stuff with her, and I was going, wow, Linda, you really know a lot of stuff, you know? But it was because I was looking at it from her standpoint. Remember that people see you differently than you see yourself. Because when you're looking at yourself, you're looking at all that stuff, all the things that you want to hide, all the insecurities that you have, you know. What did you say earlier? What will people think? You know, so you're seeing and hearing all of that within yourself, but you're not seeing how people see you.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes we think, oh, you know, we think that we're so important that people think and talk about us so much. But in actual fact, majority of people are busy thinking about themselves.
Yeah, that's right.
What they want to do.
Yeah.
So just at the end, you know, considering all your journey, if, you know, if there are people watching us and they think, you know, I feel like I need to change something in my life, or I want to change, but I'm not sure, what would you recommend as the first step?
As their first step, to
Yeah.
ask themselves this one very basic question: what is it that I really want? And then to ask themselves it again: what is it that I really want? And I say that because when I ask people that, they'll say, oh, I want this and this and this. And I go, okay, great. What is it you really want? And then they go, oh, well, no, I really want this. And then I go, and what is it you really want? Because it's layers. It's like baklava, you know, you're pulling off the layers of phyllo dough, you know, and stuff. And so there's layers and layers to each and every one of us. We have taken in all that information in our entire life. We're like a computer, and it's all stored away. And then we bury things, because in our process, you know, it's 0 to 7 is where you learn the most. And then as you get older, all those dreams that you had when you were little, because you're now conditioned to be in a certain role or a certain position in your family or whatever, they just get tucked away. So you've got to go through a process of really digging down to what is it you really want. That's part of my coaching program, is to spend a whole week on what is it that you really want. Because we don't know anymore. And I woke up one day when I was 63 sobbing because I didn't know who I was after 2 families. That's when I went to Portugal. And so we learned to put these masks on to play the roles that are required by everyone. So just ask yourself, what is it that I really want?
That's wonderful. Thank you. So what is it that you really want? And then, you know, going back to the advice from the beginning, is taking it one step at a time.
Right.
And not looking too far into the future towards, you know, the next 30 years, but starting slowly. And I really love the dragonfly as well. Let's not forget about that. You know, if you're stuck in something, you can change the direction at any time. And I guess live more consciously, so you know what is it that you want, and why, and what you're doing about it.
Right.
Linda, it's been such a pleasure. I mean, what a story. Certainly one of the most inspiring stories from a guest I have had on the show. And also,
thank you.
It's I think, you know, it's a story of determination, of not giving up, but also looking really deep within yourself and not being afraid of, you know, dealing with shame and dealing with guilt, and really taking the time to process it, and not being afraid to say, this isn't working for me, I'm going to do something.
Right.
I really like that.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much.
It's been absolutely wonderful.